Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm here with Dr. Russell Teams, a board-certified chiropractic neurologist. And I've been wanting to make this video for a very long time because this past year some really weird things started happening to me, and this is the guy who helped me fix it. I had been doing really well with my mold treatment, and I was doing really well physically. And then all of a sudden, I started having weird symptoms where if I did any sort of exercise or exerted myself at all, my left arm would start being really fatigued. And at first it just started being really fatigued, and that was it. And I noticed it when I was like cleaning a big pan, and it'd be like, oh, well, it's a heavy pan, so my arm's fatigued. But then it started getting so that less made it worse. So it got to the point where if I picked up my water bottle, my left arm would be so fatigued, and so fatigued to the point that I just couldn't even really do anything with it. So I would just use my right arm instead of my left arm. And then it just sort of kept morphing and getting worse to the point that it would not only feel fatigued, but it would actually physically change color. And it would sometimes be like a deep red or deep blue, and it was insane. And we went to so many doctors. I have a great medical team, and no one knew what to do. And we didn't know, we had no idea what to do. I was looking online for arm not working when use, and I mean, it was like there was nothing out there. And then finally, we came across someone who had gone and seen a different chiropractic neurologist. And so my mom was like, you know what, there's one close to you, make an appointment. So after explaining all of that to you, what was your thought when I was sitting there in your office?
Well, it was, first of all, what's funny is based on all the symptoms you were having, I knew that certain parts of your brain weren't firing quite right, just based on the symptoms. But the interesting thing about it was when you came in, you had all of your paperwork done, you were like the best type of patient. You were very organized, everything was written out. Because you told your story so much, you had to do that ahead of time, right? So, but it was, you were very clear, you could understand, you were able to clearly explain and understand everything that was happening to you so well that before we were even really done with the history or the examination, I already had a pretty good idea of where the problems were. Because the way that the brain works is kind of the front side of our brain is more the action oriented or the motor type of component portion of the brain. So all the output comes more so from the front part here, and then we receive all the information or perceive a little further back. And so when you were telling me about the different components of when I move this arm or when somebody touches this arm, it would turn off. So I know that the motor activity is a problem, and I know that the sensory activity is a problem. And then the coordination of really more of a vestibular reflex. When I would use this arm would now turn off. Because it got to that point, it kept getting worse and worse, and so I knew that it was very unstable. And it showed me, or told me that right away I couldn't just come in and start doing everything that I wanted to do. Because the things that we ended up doing towards the end here, we started down here, because if I did anything too much, for instance like vibration, that would put you into a full myoclonic jerk. So the myoclonus is an actual activation of muscle versus the type where we fall asleep in class. I don't know if you've ever had it, but so you jerk up. It's called a negative myoclonus. So there's two different types of myoclonus, and you were showing the positive myoclonus. So based on just that response, I had a pretty good idea that was involved in the basal ganglia. Ultimately, what it was that you were dealing with here, the cause seemed to be more of a sensory-based mismatch of motor output to that arm, so it would react inappropriately to stimulus. And so when we would touch it or we would think about it, it would automatically either constrict too much or would not constrict enough. And it would shut it off, because you need blood flow or fuel to move things around. So you weren't putting blood flow to your brain up here, and you weren't putting blood flow to your brain down here, all at the same time. In addition to that, your whole body would get tired.
Like my whole body would become extremely fatigued. And then if I tried to do anything while I was in that state, I would have the myoclonic reaction where I would just be jerking and looking like I'm having a seizure. I mean, it was crazy.
There was this cognitive piece that I had to kind of chip away at so that you could your brain could perceive the fact that you could actually change it based on that
Yeah.
thought process. And that was a major turning point for you.
Yeah.
And so in addition, prior to that, we had to actually start with the very light tactile stimulation. Remember
Yeah.
we started in your
Oh,
feet?
I know. Like, I remember one of the very first days, it was like you had a little makeup brush and you were doing like that to my foot, and my arm was just turning off, and it was the weirdest thing when I tried to explain it to people.
Yeah, it's so that's the whole thing. The back side of the brain, it receives all the information from our world, because the brain is a sensory-driven organ. So if our sensory intake is off, or our perception of that intake, if it's basically a threat, then of course we're going to freak out, so to speak. And that pathway with you was off, and so every time something would touch you, it would fire that pathway inappropriately, and it would turn your arm off.
I remember at the very beginning we did a lot with like a sideways mirror, and so like you would do it only to my right hand,
Correct.
but it looked like it was my left hand.
Correct. So that's called mirror therapy. And so what we had to do was use a mirror on one side to bring out the perception of your better side.
Yeah.
And so as we would do this tactile stimulation on your arm and your leg, it wasn't a threat to your brain.
Yeah.
And so by us looking in the mirror at the right hand, we actually had to take all of your
Yeah, we had to
all of
take
your
off my
bracelets
stuff,
off,
'cause-
so they looked the same.
Yeah.
And so essentially what we were doing is
Yeah.
trying to trick her brain, or activate that parietal lobe that's a little further back on her right side, that allowed us to activate it in a way that wasn't stressful, so to speak, so that we wouldn't get that arm to turn off.
Yeah. A huge component to this was when we found out, when I made an offhand comment sitting on the table, I remember saying, you know, it's crazy that I can actually turn my arm off just by thinking about it. And I remember you stood there and you're like,
It was kind of a
You're like,
palm to face moment.
what? And so then, not because you didn't believe me, but because, so tell me about that. When I said that comment, what did you think?
So first of all, it's funny because you don't always think to ask these questions in the history. So when it comes out, it can totally change the direction that you want to take
Yeah.
with whatever rehab or application or whatever it might be. And so from that day forward, I knew that her thoughts created the problem that she was experiencing, at least to some extent, right? On this whole grand scheme of things, we had the sensory piece, the motor piece, and then this cognitive piece, where this is what she could control every day.
Yeah.
And so we tapped into that very lightly, and because she, and honestly everybody with really chronic health issues, you start to identify with what you're dealing with. Meaning, I have this, and so I have it.
Yeah.
So this is me, I can't do that.
Yeah. I'm someone whose arm turns off when I do anything.
Right. Physically, you have all the substrate to do it, but the neural pathway wasn't firing right.
Yeah.
So we had to start to fire that right. In the world of neurology, thinking about things and using cognition and visualization is 40 times more powerful than actually moving. And so it's a piece of the cerebellum that does this, and that's why it's so powerful. We couldn't use it in the beginning because just thinking about it would turn her own off.
Yeah.
We had to lay the groundwork to the point where she got to the point to be able to tolerate it. So it was really cool hearing that, because I knew that at that point we'd been working together long enough that I said, you know what, we're going to give this a shot, and
Yeah.
you're not allowed to say this, not allowed to say this, not allowed to say this, and you have to say this, this, and this.
Yep.
And that's where we started to see major breakthrough. So that was a huge break. It was a rough day, you know, because the last thing anybody wants to hear is it's all in your head.
Yeah, which
But-
is especially hard for me and many people with
Right,
Lyme, because
right.
that's what a lot of us are told before we find the diagnosis. So
because
that's
a lot of people
touchy subject.
A lot of people don't understand what to look for in the neurology world. This piece can be controlled. Watch. You
Yeah.
think about this, and boom, arm turns off.
Yeah. When we found this piece to the puzzle, we all got on board with it. It was a complete game changer. And so my homework, I had lots of homework, and I was really serious about doing
Yeah.
it. And so like we would have things printed out with dots that I would look at and do different things with, and an app that I would look at, like where's the hand?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I had all these different things, and I did them every day because I wanted this.
Yeah.
But then the homework changed to when, once we found out about the thinking and the thought process, that my homework would be to go to a mirror, and I would just take highlighter, purple highlighter, and I would put it on my arm with little dots, and I would stand there in the mirror and I would look at each dot and I would say with each one, my arm will stay on, my arm will stay on. And I would do that over and over when it wasn't off, but then anytime it turned off, you had said, do that when it turns off.
Yep.
And so I did that. It was a game changer because I was now able to turn my own arm back on. And that was very empowering and very, very helpful. So even when I was at work and something would happen, someone would tap my shoulder and my arm would go off and change colors, I would just excuse myself, go to the bathroom, and just stand there looking in the mirror and visualize as if I had the dots and just tell myself that my arm was on, my arm was on. And it was amazing. And it would come back on, and it was a huge step. And that was something that's very interesting because it's not that it's just in your head. I mean, it's your brain, which is in your head, but it's an actual process. You're not nuts, which is, I think, why it probably took so long for me to say anything, because that does sound crazy.
Eye movements and head movements and thought process can be like totally game changing for people if it's done in the right way. So especially like positivity, your new stuff is all positivity and thinking about what you want instead of what you don't want. That's that type of stuff, and gratitude is massive in the world of getting better, I would say.
And it's true. I've noticed that, and it's funny because like I'm getting more into that now, but you have been saying that all along, and I was just like, psh, I was always.
It's all part of the process, right?
I was just ignoring you because I could, but it's like. No, because it's like I just did an aerial yoga class this last week, and I was so excited about it. And I was thinking about how I've changed how my go-to thought process is, because it's like in the past I'd be telling people, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do this aerial yoga, I'm gonna be dead, my legs are gonna be so exhausted. And this time I was telling my coworkers, I was like, this is gonna be the first class where I feel good afterwards, and I'm so excited. And you know what? I did.
How hard you work and how diligent you are, and your ability to change your own thought process and be positive throughout the whole darn thing, it was seriously incredible to watch. So I appreciate that, because you got to where you are today because you're so such a good patient.
Well, thank you.
So
it's been an incredible journey, and it is so cool. Day one, I mean, I film and I document things. I was like, I want this to work because A, I want it to work, but then B, I want it to work so I can make a video about it. And I was like, this doctor's really cool, and this would work. So it needed to work on multiple levels. And I'm so glad, that it has. So if you have any weird symptoms like I did or different that your medical team doesn't know what to do with, I highly recommend seeing a functional neurologist, or you can go to Dr. Teams' website, which I'll put in the link below. So what if somebody wants to come see you but they don't live close?
So that's a great question. We actually get that question a lot. We provide what's called an intensive rehab program. So instead of, for instance, I'll just throw a hypothetical treatment plan out there, twice a week for 5 weeks. So you get 10 visits over the course of 5 weeks. That's what most people end up doing that are in town, just because of the schedule, their schedule, our schedule, and the ability to get the work in each week. With the intensive, what we do is have people fly in town. We do an evaluation on day one, and we do 2 to 3 visits of rehab each day. So we can actually take that 5-week program and squish it down into a week. Often we find that is the most important piece to improve the neuroplasticity of the brain, is to just be super intense for a week, try to get you as good as possible in that week and teach you what to do to stay stable. And then we can find you someone in your area that we've discussed the case with, so you don't have to waste months of time trying to figure it out, and we can figure it all out in a week and then get you set up with somebody back close to home.
And I would definitely recommend checking out their website. And you also have a ton of success stories.
Yes, we do. So
on your website.
So the website's azchironeuro.com, and you can go over to, I believe it's just success stories.
Success stories.
And then there's a drop down, you click on that. So those are just those are wins of certain cases that we've had, and we just hope to be able to put up a lot more every day.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. This was great. I'm excited we got to do this.
Yes, me too. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you later.
Bye.